D'Angelo Russell has the opportunity to right the ship amidst what has been his most tumultuous season yet. Welcome back to Save the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts, and this is the return of D'Angelo Russell, our Brooklyn Net, once again. Now, coming into this NBA season, D'Angelo Russell, his stock was about as high as it has been for a while now. He didn't have a great playoff stint with the Los Angeles Lakers, but that season, at least in the regular season, he was really able to show all of his worth to that team. He averaged 18 points a night on a team where he was the third option, and he was a great shooter for them when this is a team that has really struggled to find just that. He was expected to decline his player option and go into free agency, but he opted in and decided to stick with the Los Angeles Lakers. And this year, he got off to a very slow start. And typically with D'Lo, he does get off to slow starts a lot of the times to start off his NBA seasons. But this slow stretch would continue all the way until now. And it looked like whatever was going on for him last season, however he made things work, it was not happening again this year. And that he was actively hurting the team. There were moments where J.J. Redick, Lakers head coach, was visibly frustrated with D'Angelo, and he was just struggling to make it work all year in Los Angeles. His points per game were the lowest of his NBA career. His defense was no better than it has been in years past, and that is a very low bar. And his shooting percentage from beyond the arc was the lowest it had been since 2017, when he was still coming into his own as a player. Now, what this meant for D'Angelo was not just that he wasn't the right fit with Los Angeles, but it looked like he was now on the downward part of his NBA career. Because this is a guy that had been volatile, inefficient, inconsistent in years past, but there had always been bright spots that you could look at and say, hey, this guy is still a very talented player, he just needs to manage to put it all together. But there weren't a lot of bright spots to start off this NBA season for D'Lo. And it looked like that bridge with LA was just getting more burnt by the day. And ultimately, it's now ended up with him getting shipped off to Brooklyn. Which brings up once again that point of the bright spots for D'Lo when he is able to put it all together. And that is what he did on this team in years past with the Brooklyn Nets. Many would argue that the prime of D'Angelo Russell was in his first tenure with the Brooklyn Nets. This was a team where he was given the keys to the offense. And he led the Brooklyn Nets to the playoffs, a team that no one expected to go there, and D'Angelo Russell was the man leading the charge. In his second year in Brooklyn, he was an all-star, the only all-star nod of his career. And there are a lot of parallels from his first tenure in Brooklyn to where we are now, where he's about to reunite with his Brooklyn Nets team. Because in both circumstances, he went from a disappointing tenure in Los Angeles to Brooklyn, when there were a lot of question marks around him. The first time around, there was kind of an off-the-court controversy as well, with a situation about him snitching on Nick Young, his teammate, and that was a whole ordeal. And at this point, D'Angelo Russell, up to this point, he was the second overall pick in the 2015 NBA draft, and he didn't live up to that in LA. He had a couple good moments, but once again, he didn't look like a good fit with this Lakers team, and he looked like quite a much more raw prospect than we saw at Ohio State. And for the waiting years of Kobe Bryant, D'Angelo Russell was not the right guy for the job. So they send him off to the Nets, and we're at a point where there are a lot of questions about D'Lo. Is he a bust at the number 2 overall pick? His production has been all right, especially for a very young point guard. But in terms of how he's impacting the game, he flamed out in Los Angeles. Combine that with the off-the-court controversy, there are a lot of question marks going D'Angelo's way. But then he goes to Brooklyn. In that first year, he averaged 17. And it's a solid year, and it looks like his career is on an upward trajectory now, at least compared to how it was in Los Angeles. And then year 2 in Brooklyn, he becomes an all-star. And that is a very young, fun, and exciting Brooklyn Nets team to watch, led by one man, D'Angelo Russell. And then after that, he's kind of bounced around a little bit. I would argue his best season in the NBA was the year that followed his Brooklyn tenure in Golden State, but ultimately, of course, while Steph and Clay were injured, that's what allowed D'Lo to really thrive in Golden State, and they wanted to stick with the Splash Brothers. So he's traded midseason to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And he has an up and down tenure there too, until he ends up back in LA. And at one point, he is a very critical piece of this Lakers team. But now, once again, we arrive at a spot in Los Angeles where there are a lot of questions about D'Angelo Russell, and not a lot of them are positive. So there's a parallelism, once again, in the fact that there are always flashes from D'Lo, at least, maybe not this season, but in terms of his overall career as a Laker, in both stints, there have been flashes of brilliance at the point guard position and the offensive talent that he can be. But ultimately, the lights almost seem too bright in Los Angeles. And that's something that has really always kind of followed D'Angelo, is the lights being too bright, that narrative, because he is a known playoff dropper. His efficiency goes down, his production goes down, and he can't back that up with good defense because he has never been a particularly good defender at that position. So come playoff time, when the lights are at their brightest, there's not a lot of positives for D'Lo. And that actually led him getting benched last year in the Lakers playoff series. So there's always been the question with him about if the lights are too bright. And perhaps as a result of that, Los Angeles just isn't a good fit for him. Because everywhere else he's been the best version of himself, arguably. There were some really good years there in Minnesota, and some great moments that really show you the potential that he has as an offensive engine. There was one game a couple years ago against the Philadelphia 76ers where he had a combined 27 points in just the fourth quarter and overtime alone. And so there are moments of brilliance, but the lights are too bright in Los Angeles, and he also does not have the keys and the trust from the organization that he did in other spots. And I think that's going to be the key to unlocking what he can still be at this point in his career. Is he ever going to be an All-NBA player? Absolutely not. That ship has well sailed. But he's only 28 years old, and that's the time when a lot of NBA players and athletes in general are really in their athletic prime. This is when he should be playing the best ball of his career, and it's his worst season yet. And it comes into play as well is the LeBron effect. And so often we see players, they play with LeBron, and he's a very on-ball player. As a small forward, he's arguably more of a point guard. A true point forward in every sense of the word. And as a result of that, D'Lo is another guy who thrives on ball. That is where he's at his best. And alongside LeBron, he gets less opportunities there. So his offensive game is put a little bit more on a leash. And you combine that with so much media attention on him. Anything he does wrong is going to be heavily criticized while he's in Los Angeles, and especially playing alongside LeBron. And a combination of those two factors, D'Lo's going to be free of those now. And when he joins the Brooklyn Nets, this is a team that has always played second fiddle to the New York Knicks. So despite it being a major media market, most of the focus in that area is on the Knicks. So if D'Lo has a couple bad games, he's not going to get piled on with criticism from every spot. He's going to have a lot more leeway, a lot more grace to play his own game and come into his own and not have to immediately be a 20-point per game scorer in his first game as a Brooklyn Net. And secondly, he's going to have a lot more of a trusted role in this offense. Much like we saw in his first tenure in Brooklyn, D'Angelo Russell has the keys, especially with the loss of Dennis Schroeder for the Nets. They need a shot-creating guard because Cam Thomas is a good creator for himself, but what he can't really do is play make for others. D'Angelo Russell can play make for both himself and the players around him, and that can elevate the floor of this team notably. Plus, there's not going to be guys like LeBron taking away shots from him, so he has more of an offensive role to play make for himself and others, and he's going to have a lot more of a green light in terms of shot selection, and he gets to really focus on his game and not have a lot of criticism from every single area like he did in LA. Because players can have bad games, and that That's definitely a major factor with D'Lo is his inconsistency. But when that's not highlighted, when you don't shine a spotlight on every single negative play that he has, that can really boost a player's confidence because they're able to move on from a play more quickly and just focus on making the right one next time. And as a result of all these factors, there's a very good chance that D'Angelo Russell is able to right the ship in Brooklyn. Is he ever going to be an all-star again? It doesn't look super likely. And of course, he's never going to be an all-NBA player. But as a floor raiser and a guy who's going to be more trusted in the offensive flow of this team now, and allowed to play at his own pace and have bad plays sometimes, but be able to make up for it on the next one, D'Angelo Russell has the potential to really turn his career around. Because much like his first tenure in Brooklyn, he goes there, and there's a lot of question marks about his future in the league. But given more reign in this offense, is he going to elevate them to a championship contender? No. But he can sure elevate his stock over with the Brooklyn Nets and revitalize his NBA career. That seemed to be on a downhill spiral, especially with this NBA season. And in being right in the middle of his athletic prime, the sky is the limit for the return of D'Angelo Russell, a Brooklyn Net once again. And that is all for today's episode of State of the Association. Thank you for listening. I am your host, Nash Roberts.